Hey students, in this video we're going to talk about a component that we haven't used much of yet called volumes. And volumes are basically, most of the time, invisible boxes that do a thing. So for example, one of the more simple ones is the blocking volume. And much like geometry, I can resize this and move it around. And what it does, if we were to play, is that it's just going to block my movement. I can't walk through there. So this is the old school video game invisible wall. Now, some of the other volumes that are useful include the light mass importance volume, and you'd put this over your whole level and it'll speed up your lighting builds. The nav mesh bounds volume and modifier volume, which help us have AI walk around in spaces. The physics volume, which lets you change the physics in the volume, affecting gravity or creating wind and stuff like that. The trigger volume, which we're going to use a lot more in different videos and in blueprints to make stuff happen. Trigger volumes are basically for setting something off when a player walks into an area. But right now, I want to talk about this one, the post-process volume. Now, post-process is basically a final VFX pass when you're doing video work. So basically, this gives us a whole lot of options here that affect how our game looks. So for example, I'm going to click here and turn on, under lens flare, I'm going to turn on the little checkbox next to intensity and tint and some of these and turn them all on. And now you look here, I have a sun in the scene. But if I go inside the volume and look at the sun, you can see I now have a lens flare. And that is a post-process effect that's been turned on. And if I get out of the zone, it turns off again. I'm going to turn these off. Another effect I could show would be the chromatic aberration, and you could probably see it if here we look at this torch, and then if I go in the zone and sort of move over to the side, let's see if I can get it to happen here. Might have to turn it up. You'll see it sort of breaks the color apart at the edges of my camera. As we get closer to the edge, it breaks down. You could also tint or change the sort of global color balance. Here I can play with the saturation in certain colors and make it look more red or look more blue when I am inside the box. And here you can see I move out and move in. But the main reason that I would bring this up is you may have noticed in working that Unreal does this rather annoying thing where if you look down for a while, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter. And then if you look up, it darkens again. And if you're in like a dark room, if you make like an interior space, it can get very dark. And there's a transition going between that. And that's because by default, Unreal tries to normalize your brightness depending on what you're looking at. Now this can be distracting. And sometimes you want the dark areas to look dark and the bright areas to look bright. So we can normalize that. So here in your post-process volume, what you want to look for is the area that's called exposure. You can also just type in the search bar brightness, because there's two, min brightness and max brightness. And the trick is, you basically want to set them both to the same number. Here I'm going to set them both to 1 and 1. This means that it will no longer change. If I'm in the box and I look down, it's staying consistent. Now, if I'm out of the box and I look down, I'm getting back to this like crazy brightness situation again. So, how do we make it so the box affects our whole world? Well, I could just scale the box up till it affects the whole space. But easier than that, if we scroll down in the post-process volume, there is a section way down, because I have everything open. There's a section called Post-Process Volume Settings. And in there is a checkbox called Infinite Extent. And if you click it, as it says here with the explanation, it makes it so that the box affects the whole world. And now this is just a useful box that I can put anywhere, and any change we make affects the whole world. And you can immediately see it turn on when I click it. You can sort of see how it normalizes. Now, if this feels too bright for you, you can go back to brightness, and you can change it. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that making the number bigger does not make it brighter. In fact, it makes it darker. If I make it 2 and 2, you will again see it darker. Now, don't use this to make it like artificial nighttime in your scene, because this is a post-process effect, so it's not a natural effect being applied. But sometimes I find 1.5, 1.5 to feel a little more natural than 1.1, but it will depend on your own scene. And if you'd like to also play around and turn on lens flares or stuff like that, go for it. Just don't go too crazy. You don't want to mess with people's eyes or look too much. But here I'm going to turn on some lens flare, and now I get some cool lens flare from the sun.